Year one was a rough one for Bryce Young and everyone here in Carolina. And because of how rough it was and how poorly constructed the roster was around him, should Bryce Young get a mulligan? I'll answer that question among other listener questions on this week's edition of the weekly Friday Mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council. Why? Because on Fridays like today, I'm right here answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. The best way to get those into me is by either adding me or DMing me. But of course, follow me on Twitter at Julian Council and get your questions in for next week's edition of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. All right, let's get into it. The weekly Friday mailbag yet again here on a Friday, every single Friday throughout the offseason, unless there's something else going on like the draft a couple weeks ago or any big breaking news. I'll be right here answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. Let's go ahead and start off with an old friend of the show, Percy. Hadn't heard from him in a while. And he sent me an interesting question about Bryce Young and the turmoil that he dealt with in year one and whether we should give him a mulligan. Percy says, because of all the turmoil, does Bryce Young get a Trevor Lawrence type mulligan of a first year before we pass judgment on if we use the top pick of last year's draft correctly? He points out some numbers from Trevor Lawrence. He was the number one overall pick in 2021. Urban Meyer, who was his head coach, an absolute shame that he ever was a head coach in the NFL, was fired midseason, 2-11, which is just ridiculous that Frank Reich got less time than Urban Meyer did. But Trevor Lawrence had 3,641 total yards that season, 12 touchdowns, 17 total interceptions. Bryce Young, as we know, the number one overall pick last year in the draft. Frank Reich was fired at 1-10 after 11 games. Again, a true crime. While Frank Reich didn't do a great job, Frank Reich is a respected NFL coach. Urban Meyer is not that and never will be after what happened in Jacksonville that season. Bryce Young had 2,877 total yards, 11 touchdowns, and only 10 interceptions. So that's one of the good numbers to look at when looking at these two and really Bryce Young's last season in Carolina in year one. So lots of comparisons between the 21 Jags and the 2023 Panthers team. Yes and no. As I've stated fairly clearly without saying it, Urban Meyer, terrible NFL head coach, should have never been in that job down there in Jacksonville. Frank Reich had been a winning head coach in the NFL. He won a Super Bowl as an offensive coordinator with the Philadelphia Eagles, went to Indianapolis, and when he had a stable quarterback situation, he went to the playoffs with Andrew Luck and with Phillip Rivers, and he even did a good job with Jacoby Brissett, even though they weren't a playoff team with Wentz and Matt Ryan. Things did not work out for him, and that led to him being fired. And we saw that his offense was largely archaic last year, and trying to have the different philosophies meld into one offense did not work, and it led to infighting and the Hunger Games culture at Bank of America Stadium, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. He did not do a good job at all, but Frank Reich, by all accounts, is an honest, good man. Urban Meyer, outside of Gainesville and Columbus, don't know how many people would be vouching for Urban Meyer, the man, especially the NFL coach, after what we saw in Jacksonville. So the head coaches, it's definitely not comparable. It just did not work out for Frank. Urban, Wolf. As far as the numbers, like they're fairly similar. Bryce did not turn it over as much through the air. He did have those fumbles, Saints fumble. He had the one against the Vikings. DJ Wooden, who's now a Carolina Panther, returned that for a touchdown. That wasn't ideal, but it wasn't like he was a complete turnover machine. Neither he or Trevor played all that well, and the weapons around them, they weren't great that season in either one of them. The general manager, Scott Fitterer, is no longer here. Trent Baalke has survived so far in Jacksonville. I don't look at it as an apples-to-apples comparison, but you can see that the situation in Jacksonville was effed up beyond belief. Same thing here in Carolina. The situation was effed up for Bryce Young. So you probably should be a little bit more patient and give your quarterback another opportunity. Now, if you look at what Trevor Lawrence has done in, I believe it was year two, they went to the playoffs. and won a playoff game before losing to the Chiefs in the divisional round. Last year, they completely fell apart. He was also injured. That played a big factor into it. Panthers didn't even play against him. They played against CJ Beathard in that shutout in Jacksonville, which is still appalling that happened. So appalling where David Tepper decided had to throw a drink on a fan because he was so upset about the product that he has built here in Carolina. Lawrence hasn't got his fifth-year option yet. He got it, rather. They're still waiting on whether they're going to give him a contract. They have not said that he is their franchise guy just yet. I do think he'll end up being the franchise guy in Jacksonville. You just got to put weapons around him, and the Jags have done that over the last couple of off seasons. I think the Panthers did that this off season. So, yeah, I'm not sitting here passing a ton of judgment on Bryce. There were certainly things that he didn't do well last year that he needs to correct in this new offense under Dave Canales, and that he needed to have more protection up front. Yes, he needed to have a stable running game. Yes, he needed to have better playmakers on the outside who could actually separate, catch the ball, and then do something with it. Yes, all those things are true. Everything failed offensively last year, including Bryce Young and everyone around him. So can't necessarily give him a complete mulligan because there are no mulligans in football. Like for Bryce Young, he dealt with football adversity, and good for Bryce that the only trying time he's really faced. So, I mean, I don't know his whole life, but the trying time that he faced last year was playing football as a number 1 overall pick and having a 2-15 record. He's truly living a dream if that is the hardship that he's having to go through in his professional career. I'm not too concerned about Bryce. I still believe in him, and this organization still believes in him, and they've done everything they can this offseason to help him heading into the 2024 season. So you can't get a mulligan. He's going to be better for what he had to go through last year. You just hope that you get to see more of the Bryce that we saw in the final drive against Houston and Atlanta, and really that entire second half against Green Bay when he was cooking, than what we saw at other points last season. Matt has another question about Bryce Young, saying in year 2, what would Bryce have to do to be considered the franchise quarterback for the Panthers? If he has a season like we saw Patrick Mahomes have, or really what CJ Stroud did last year in Houston, but simply what Bryce needs to do is do his job, man. Dave Canales has talked about it's not all about Bryce having to carry the team. That's what they basically were trying him to do last year, which is asinine to ask a rookie to do that much. And we have seen rookies have high-level success like Stroud did last year in Houston. But you look at what was around him, yes, the offensive line had a lot of injuries, but that's still an offensive line that has 2 foundational tackles in Titus Howard, and you look at Larry Tunsil. They brought in Dalton Schultz, rather. The Panthers brought in Hayden Hurst. Schultz is still a Houston Texan. Hayden Hurst is no longer here. They had Tank Dell. The Panthers got Jonathan Mingo. Mingo's still here, probably 4th in the depth chart at wide receiver. Tank Dell is a key part of that offense moving forward. They have Nico Collins. Carolina Panthers traded away their young, bright receiver in DJ Moore, and they had Adam Thielen, who good player, but not Nico Collins, doesn't have that trajectory moving forward. There's a lot of things that Houston did offensively that was great for Stroud that the Panthers did not do for Bryce Young. I feel like that's a pretty fair statement to make, and you could also still believe that the Panthers made the wrong decision by not drafting CJ Stroud. I'm willing to give it more time and to see what Bryce is able to do with a competent offensive line, a running game, and guys who can actually catch the ball and possibly do something with it once they do catch the ball. They got to get open first, too. I think they have that now this season. I don't know if they have it in spades, but they have at least 1.5 guys who can do that. We need maybe a couple more of those, of course. So as far as what he's got to do is just play as 111th. That's what Dave has talked about. Just be 111th of the offense. Don't have to carry it. Just do your job. If he goes out there, takes care of the football, gets back to the fundamentals, and is able to cook occasionally like he did against Green Bay, I think we're going to feel pretty good about what Bryce Young is going to be in Carolina moving forward and possibly being the franchise quarterback. Really, it's year 3. He needs to show this fall, of course, some step in the right direction. And then in 2025, when they have to make the decision after that season on the 5th-year option, that's when he really needs to show that he is the franchise. If he doesn't, then we're going to be back to the drawing board here in Carolina, likely getting some washed-up veteran, and then everyone's going to be fired, and it's just going to be a headache and heartache for all of us here who care about this team. All right, let's take a quick pause and come back and answer more questions as rookie minicamp is going on. Is there a dark horse to make the roster who is here in Carolina this weekend? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. When it comes to your financial future, you think you've done it all. You've saved, you've researched, you've invested all that you can. Now you need to take those investments to the next level by using what every financial great uses, Yahoo Finance. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. They are the #1 finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. Securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401k and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your #1 ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because of eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. Of all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Let's get back into it. The weekly Friday mailbag once again here on Locked On Panthers. Either at me or DM me on Twitter at Julian Council to get your questions in for next week's edition of the show. And I always tell you, if I don't get your question on the show, do not fret. I will try to answer your question via DMs. If you do DM me or if you at me, I'll try to get back to you, answer whatever your question is. And no hard feelings, please. So yeah, get those questions into me for next week's edition of the show. Over now to Luke. There's a question about UDFAs, rookie minicamp going on right now as I'm sitting here talking to you in Charlotte. And let's talk about a potential player who could end up maybe making the roster. Luke says, I know every year we as fans get enamored with a guy likely who won't make the roster. Last year was Rajon Wright of Last Chance of You fame. This year, for me, it's Jalen Coker. The guy was a stud in college, especially last season, albeit at a smaller school against lesser opposition. But with the clear drop-off in talent from our top 3 wide receivers to the rest of the group, is it feasible he can at least make the roster? Steve Smith Sr. called him the best route runner in the wide receiver class. And with his unit struggling too much to create separation last year, could he forge some sort of role on the team? Possibly. And I have had multiple people come out and tell me about what Steve Smith Sr. said about Jalen Coker. I should probably go take the time to go listen to what Steve had to say about him. That is high praise. And Steve has had high praise of receivers coming to Carolina before. He talked about the night that DJ Moore got drafted, that the Panthers had not been able to replace him until that evening when they drafted DJ. And DJ Moore was a really good receiver for Carolina. Was he ever Steve Smith Sr.? No. I would argue that he still was. He still has not been replaced in Carolina since he left here to go to Baltimore, and the blood and guts game that happened with the season after. I still don't believe that they replaced him. They've had some fine receivers. I think they've had a really good one in DJ Moore, but Steve Smith Sr. is going to be a Hall of Famer. I'm not asking the next guy to be a Hall of Famer, but DJ was never even a Pro Bowler. And I don't think he was this past season in Chicago. Good player, has been on bad teams. That certainly factors into it. And I've mentioned that in the past when talking about Derek Brown. Hell, he should have been a Pro Bowler from the beginning. Did not need to be an alternate. He should have been there from the beginning because he's an outstanding player and set NFL records. Love DJ. Think he's a good player. I don't even think that he even replaced Steve in the manner that long-term would have helped because he's not even here. Now, Steve loves Jonathan Mingo. So far, that has not yielded the kind of results that Steve would have hoped. And I think there's probably some reasons to that as well. And got to give him some time. I've sat here and I've given some grace to Bryce Young. Should show the same to Jonathan Mingo. But the Panthers coaching staff is showing that they like some other guys over him. They're not going to sit here and just wait for Mingo to show up and show what he can do, if he can even do it at the NFL level. So Jalen Coker, now the next in line, who is getting high praise from Steve Smith Sr. Coker, if you're not familiar, is a 6'1", 208 wide receiver from Holy Cross up in Worcester, Mass. Played under Bob Chesney, who's now the head coach at James Madison up there in Harrisonburg, Virginia. Last season, 59 receptions, 1,035 yards, and 15 touchdowns. He's a first-team FCS All-American, finalist for the Walter Payton Award. And when you talk about like lesser competition, FCS is still Division I football. It may not be Power 5 or G5 football, but there are plenty of guys who come from the FCS who are All-Americans who then go up to the FBS level and have high-level success. Now, going from FCS as a career player there over to the NFL, a little bit different, but there is plenty of examples of guys who have played in the FCS that have come up and had a lot of success in the NFL. I'm thinking like, I'm not going to point at the Hall of Famers, but Joe Flacco was an FCS quarterback at Delaware. Now they're going to go to the FBS soon, but he was an FCS quarterback there, and Joe Flacco had a pretty good career. And still, even last year, was playing well when he had to fill in for Deshaun Watson up there in Cleveland. There was a multitude of examples of guys who have come in and had success. We even saw like Brenton Burson wasn't really good here in Carolina, but FCS guy, Jerry Richardson being the owner at the time, probably helped a lot with that. Brenton Burson went to Wofford, made his way up here. There's plenty of examples year in and year out of guys coming from the smaller levels who have success at the NFL. Lance Zierlein of the NFL Network had this evaluation of Coker heading into the draft, saying the evaluation for Coker boils down to balancing his pro caliber size and ball skills against his level of competition and potential lack of NFL quickness and speed. His focus, ball tracking, and timing give him distinct advantages that other receivers lack, and his catch radius and hand strength helped him make mincemeat of Ivy League coverages over the goal near the goal line. Coker's deep speed appears to be average, so he will need to refine his route running to become better equipped to beat NFL defenders in space and open up workable windows for his quarterback. So Coker's talented and productive, but his testing numbers will need to be huge for his draft slotting and chances in the league. Now, he did not get drafted. Zierlein had him as a 5th or 6th round pick. That was the grade he had on him, and we know he went as a UDFA. So there's someone out there who believes that this guy was worthy of being selected on day 3. And there's also someone out there, Steve Smith Sr., future Hall of Famer, who played the wide receiver position, who thinks that he's one of the best route runners in this pass receiving class. And here's the thing, too, y'all, to understand. Now, 5th round, you probably want to get taken, but once you get to like the 6th or 7th, a lot of guys do call teams and just say, don't draft me. Let me go choose where I'm going to go. And these guys typically do get a decent amount of money. I want to say Coker was one of them who got a decent amount of money as far as like where he was going. Yeah. They gave him a $25,000 signing bonus, $225,000 salary guarantee. Like that's pretty good for a UDFA. So this is a guy that did better, honestly, not getting drafted than had he gotten drafted, and now comes into a situation, to answer your question, Luke, to where he could have a chance. Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen, and Xavier Legette, those are the top 3 receivers in Carolina, I believe, and I'm sure that's probably the consensus for a lot of people out there. Jonathan Mingo, Emir Smith-Marset are the next tier of guys who I believe will be on the roster. I just don't know what their impact's going to be this season. Smith-Marset will be more of a returner again, and I imagine they'll probably try to use him in some gadget situations, potentially. Mingo, I have no clue. Terrace Marshall, David Moore, those are the guys that have been next tier. Then you have like Cam Sims, and then you have other guys out there whose names like escape me right now that I don't think are make the roster. So there's an opportunity. Like TMJ didn't want to be here. He wanted to be traded, and he was a healthy scratch for most of the season at the end of the year. David Moore, he's an older veteran who's bounced around, got an opportunity in Tampa last year under Canales. Didn't really do much there. There's an opportunity. And that's when you look at these guys that we obsess over. Is there an opportunity for them to make the roster? And last year, Rajon Wright, who, let's be honest, no one would even care who this guy was had he not been on Last Chance U, if he was on this Netflix show, just like with F1. A lot of you guys wouldn't even be fans of F1 if it wasn't on Netflix, but because it was, and it's in your consciousness, now it's something you obsess over, which is much like Rajon Wright. And with Rajon Wright, didn't make the team. With F1, it's like the same guy wins every single week. How's it really entertaining? And this is coming from someone who works at NASCAR, so I imagine I'm probably a little bit biased here. I just don't get it. Either way, I just think that there is an opportunity for Jalen Coker to make it based off of the opportunity that sits here with the lack of receiving talent outside of really the top 2, Johnson and Thielen. We don't know what Legette's going to do here. He's going to get an opportunity, of course. He was a first-round pick for a reason. They liked him for a reason. He's going to get his chance. After that, it's really up. It's anybody's chance to get onto the roster. I mean, Mingo's probably going to be on it. Smith-Marsette's going to be on it. After that, no idea. So there you go, Jalen Coker. Welcome to Carolina. And they clearly, with the amount of the money they gave him, they think that he can be a solid player for them potentially and make the roster. So we'll see how that plays out. I don't think he's somebody that people are enamored over and doesn't have a chance. Like there's other guys in the past that didn't have a chance. And Rajon Wright stepped into a corner room that had some questions there. So he could have had a chance, but did not work out for him. Okay, let's take another quick pause. I'll come back here and answer the rest of your weekly Friday mailbag questions right here on Locked On Panthers. This next segment is brought to us by our sponsor, BetterHelp. Sometimes all we need... Fuck me. This next segment is brought to us by our sponsor, BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest. Big or small, certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased on your life. So today, I want to say how I really feel about something. You might even be thinking about the same thing this week, and it's been raining far too much, y'all. Been raining way too much. April showers bring May flowers. It's May 10th. Where has the sun been? It keeps raining. And this is the thing. As you should know, if you guys live here in North Carolina, if it's going to be 5 straight days of projected sun, it's not going to be 5 straight days. It's going to be 2 days of sun, and then it's going to thunderstorm. And the storm that hit the other day, it was kind of scary. So I'm sick of the rain. Let it be sun, man. Therapy can be different for everyone. Most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports team, and it's important to get things off your chest every once in a while. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist. And switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. A few more questions on this weekly Friday mailbag edition of Locked On Panthers. Starting off now with James. He says, after the draft, the roster is starting to take shape. Who from the players likely to return is set to benefit the most from the new coaching team? And to a lesser extent, general manager. Bryce is the obvious answer, but beyond that, who could be the surprise who really steps up when we weren't necessarily expecting it? Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer outside of Bryce, who clearly, with the offensive line additions, the weapon additions that have been made this offseason, they wanted to make sure that Bryce was in this position to succeed. Defensively, it's basically the same coaching staff. They've added some new players in. I don't know who on defense necessarily. It feels like it should be an offensive question based off of an answer as far as should be an offensive player should be the answer based off of that's the side of the ball where things have really changed the most. Man, Thielen, I suppose, is going to be in a better spot because he's not having to carry the load. He could benefit from that, getting Deontay Johnson. But that's more of just the additions to the roster, more so than like the new coaching staff coming in and a new general manager helping him out. I think the name that kind of comes up to me, what possibly could be like Icky, new coaching staff, new offense. Possibly they're going to give him more help on the left side if he needs it. They're not just going to leave out on the island. Thomas Brown brought that up late last season that he could have done more to help Icky Ekwonu. Of course you could have done more, but you didn't for whatever reason. And he's no longer a problem in Carolina. He's someone who could benefit. I look at Jonathan Mingo, someone I was just talking about as I don't know what to expect from him this year. This is a coaching staff where Brad Idzik has been a wide receiver coach, Nate Carroll, Dave Canales has been the actual wide receiver coach in Carolina, whose name escapes me right now. You got 4 guys with wide receiver coach backgrounds on the offensive coaching staff. You would think that young guys like Xavier Legette should be able to benefit from that. And you would think that Jonathan Mingo should be able to benefit from them coming in here and putting together an offensive scheme that maybe better suits him than the one that they had last year. So Chuba possibly, because they want to run the ball a lot. And Jonathan Brooks, yes, they drafted him. He's versatile. They're going to need more than just Jonathan Brooks. I think Chuba Hubbard can benefit from the new downhill rushing attack or whatever the rushing attack is going to be in Carolina. So, yeah, we'll see what happens there. But those are some of the guys that just come off the top of my mind who could benefit from the new coaching staff. Van, what's the final question for this Friday? With offenses going past crazy and using 3 wide receiver sets as a standard these days, is it time to consider nickel the new standard defense? If so, what nickel cornerback slot is best for us? How does this nickel's ability to play the run factor in Ejiro Evero's decision to who starts? Well, yeah, this has kind of been the case anyways. Like if you've been paying attention, like the Panthers have not been playing 3 linebacker sets anyways. They've already been basically in a base nickel front and defense, and that's been the case for like most teams in the league. That's something we've known for a while now. As far as who would start, probably going to be Troy Hill to start off because he's a veteran. but bringing up the run stopping ability, that's what they talk about. Chau Smith-Wade was really good at Washington State. And he's versatile, can play safety, can play nickel, can play on the outside, probably going to primarily play nickel and spell Troy Hill and rotate with him. I think right now it's going to be Troy Hill who starts as a veteran, understanding the scheme. And as time goes along, it's possible that Chau Smith-Wade gets more opportunities. It gets to be the starter here in Carolina. But yeah, they're going to be in a base nickel. You're only going to see 2 linebackers. That's the standard across football nowadays. College level, NFL level, probably even high school level. That's the standard. And I think you're going to go with the veteran, and then maybe the rookie takes over down the road this season, but certainly next year in 2025. All right, it's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter, at Julian Council, where I'll be back with you next Friday to answer your weekly Friday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me to get those questions into me sometime next week. But before Thursday, because that's typically when I record. I have been recording on the last couple of Fridays, but get those in by Thursday, and I'll try to answer your question. So in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding, and I'll talk to y'all on Monday, where we'll be joined by Jonathan Davis, the host of Locked On Longhorns, to talk about the 2 Longhorns who just came to Carolina, Jonathan Brooks and Jatavion Sanders.